Welcome to our tutorial for our daily review, question number 15. Question 15 is describing three different concepts: opposites, absolute value, and location. And for all three of those things, we're going to use a number line similar to what we did in question 14. Let's talk about each one of those concepts individually, and we'll go ahead and start with opposites. Opposites are simply values that are the exact same distance from zero, but on the opposite side of zero. And so that's where that name opposite comes from, because we're describing it in relationship to zero. And you can kind of think about this like positives and negatives are opposites of each other. So let's go ahead and use a number line to help us with this process. Here's our number line. And one of the things that's different about question 15 is that our number line is actually blank. So you're going to have to build your number line depending on the question that you have. And we'll get some practice with that in this tutorial today. So I'm going to go ahead and build my number line. And let's say that our question said, well, what is the opposite of 2? Well, what I would think about is I can think about, well, if 2 is positive, I can think about what's the opposite value, which is negative, so it's negative 2. And we also simply described that opposites are values that are on the same distance from 0, but on the opposite sides of 0. So I can just kind of count and see that 2 was 2 spaces from 0, and negative 2 was also 2 spaces from 0, so we found the opposites of 0. We could do something similar if I were to ask for the opposite of negative 3. I could think about, that's negative. I know the opposite is going to be positive, so I can think that it's going to be 3. And I can verify that by just counting how many spaces from 0 the value negative 3 was and the value 3 was. And both of those are 3 spaces from 0. So I know that that's correct. Let's go ahead and move on to absolute value. And absolute value is the distance from 0. We're using some of those skills that we just did with our opposites, but it's the distance from 0, or how many spaces from 0 a number is. So again, we're going to show this with a new symbol, and that new symbol are those 2 vertical lines that are around, in this example, the number 5. So this would be, it says the absolute value of 5. And that just tells me how many spaces from 0 is 5. A great tool, again, to use for this is our number line. And so we're going to go ahead and build our number line out. In this case, I have my number line there, and I've marked where 5 is. And all I need to do is figure out how many spaces from 0 is the number 5. So I can simply count those, and I'm going to know that the absolute value, remember that's those vertical lines, of 5 is 5. 5 is 5 spaces away from 0. So that's nice and simple. Notice that we're not talking about positive spaces or negative spaces. We just want to know the total amount of spaces away from 0 that we have. That becomes really clear when we do the absolute value of negative 5. Our question remains the same. We want to know how many spaces from 0 is negative 5, and we can do this exactly the same way. We can simply count, and we would see that the absolute value of negative 5 is 5, because there are 5 spaces between negative 5 and 0. Finally, we have to talk about location. And location is simply where numbers are placed on a number line. In this case, we're going to look at an example with 4 different numbers: 5, 7, 12 thirds, and 3.5. In this case, we have some integers, 5 and 7, and we also have some decimal numbers and fractions or portions. So one of the things we need to think about is how we're going to build this number line out. I could build my number line like we've done in the past, with 0 in the middle and our positive numbers on the right and our negative numbers on the left. However, I don't have any negative numbers in this, and so that just creates a lot of wasted space, and it's going to cram all of my positive numbers in a much smaller space And so what I might suggest doing for this particular piece is go ahead and use all positive numbers. In this case, I've even spread those positive numbers out, so I have lots of space. So you can see that I have 2 spaces between each number. Notice that those are all spaced relatively equally. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that is going to give us lots of space to work with when we're trying to place these numbers on the number line. Now, one quick important thing to note is that our 0 still exists and our negative numbers still exist. And those are all going to be to the left, just like they normally would be. However, we just don't have to write all of those things down since we're not working with any negative numbers right now. So let's start with our easy ones that we have. We've got 5, that's pretty easy to place, and we've got 7, that's pretty easy to place. Those are simply whole numbers or integers, so those are nice and easy to place. Next, I've got 12 thirds and I've got 3.5. Now, for me, the easiest one to do is going to be 3.5 because I know that that's going to fall right in between 3 and 4, so I'm simply going to put 3.5 there. And then I might have to do a little bit of work for this next one and determine that 12 thirds is the same thing as 4, and so I would put 12 thirds in that place. And now I've ordered all of my numbers from least to greatest. That should hopefully give you a sense of how to work with this. Remember, you may have to adjust what your number line looks like, but we want to follow those general rules that our smaller numbers are always to the left and our larger numbers are always to the right.